Outriders has been out for a couple days now, and while the player base remains strong with the peak concurrent players actually having spiked since launch from like 100,000 to 125,000, and even looking at the past 24 hours and the number of concurrent players right now, these numbers are very strong, which means that players do want to enjoy this game when it isn't getting in the way of itself with server issues and technical issues that highlight that this game should have maybe been delayed, should have been more polished up before officially launching, or at least should have hosted an early access or something, because the launch state of the game, unfortunately, is that of yet another broken AAA project, yet another unpolished launch. And it's aggravating a lot of people because they see the potential in this game. Not to say that it revolutionizes the looter-shooter genre. If you're not someone who generally enjoy looter shooters, then this game isn't going to be for you. But for fans of looter shooters, Outriders does seem to be doing it for them. But one can hardly blame the mixed reviews when the experience is so compromised right now. Same on Steam. I mean, there's an impressive number of reviews already at 20-something thousand, but the reviews are ultimately mixed with a 65%, and the 60s is where the user score tends to sit with this game across the board. One of the things that really baffled people is that even Outriders' single-player campaign component requires you to be online, which on its own is questionable, but when you've got a game that struggles with allowing people to stay online, allowing people to engage with the servers, well, then we're looking at an experience where it would have just been a lot better, a smoother ride if at least the single-player campaign could be played offline while people wait for the servers to get fixed. Now, server issues have gotten better since launch, but certainly far from being fully fixed. People are still having trouble getting into the game, and maybe not everyone, but still enough people that it's far from over, this problem. And as if all that wasn't enough, Outriders recently detailed their very first patch notes for a major upcoming update that has pissed off quite a number of players because it focuses on nerfs, which is not a great sign for a week 1 game. And these are nerfs many people feel are unnecessary. They're nerfing everything from the powers that give players that power fantasy to the rate at which you earn rewards. And all of that is detailed in the patch notes released on the official Outriders Steam page that you can scroll down through. And the basic summary of it can be found in this PC Games N article published today. So let's go through some of the things that they nerfed. One of the things that the article highlights is that this patch nerfs a number of abilities across Tricksters, Technomancers, and Pyromancers, which is already proving controversial, especially in week 1 of a PvE co-op game. This isn't one of those games where you get to fight other players, so while that doesn't mean balance is completely irrelevant, it does mean that things don't have to be so finely fine-tuned to the degree that a PvP game would require. And one of the things that people really enjoy about this game are the powers that are offered by the different classes. And this game, instead of taking the approach of taking the classes and powers that are less powerful and bringing them up to the level that the more powerful stuff are, they instead decided to nerf things so that the powerful stuff gets brought down to the level of the weaker stuff. And that just kind of lowers the ceiling instead of raising it or keeping it level so that everything else matches that ceiling. And that's just an approach that's frustrating a lot of people. The developer said in the patch notes to justify this that while we fully intend to provide the overpowered feel for the best builds out there, we're also committed to making sure that there is build diversity in the top performing builds. By build diversity, they mean that they don't want players to just play as one build that is the all-powerful build. They want different builds to be viable for different reasons, and that's a sound logic, but the approach of taking something that people are really enjoying the feeling of and taking that away, instead of giving everything else that feeling by, again, raising everything up to meet that level, is something that people are baffled by. Though I've also seen people on the other side of the fence explaining why this might be justified, but for the most part, people don't seem to like this approach. They seem to think that a game that's only been out for a week should, kind of be enhancing things rather than looking into ways to nerf things. And a lot of people feel as though the nerfing wasn't fully well thought out. It feels like a quick fix rather than a solution. It feels like a band-aid rather than a way to really solve the issue. Take an additive approach, not a subtractive approach, is what a lot of people are saying. As for the kinds of nerfs we are seeing from the various powers in the game, we're seeing everything from increased cooldowns, which means that between each time you use powers, you'll have to wait longer to use them again. Power reductions across the board, reduced damage, you name it. Just as controversial, if not more, is the nerf to loot in this looter-shooter experience. According to PC Games N, the way they nerf loot is that, for example, Historian, Bounty Hunt, and Monster Hunt quests no longer drop legendaries for subsequent completions. If there's one thing that I'm hearing people criticize most, it's this. The guarantee of legendaries dropping is a huge incentivizer and motivator for people to keep doing these missions, to partake in the end game. The fact that people know the game will always give you something interesting or something good or something potentially good at the end of a session really drives people to keep engaging with a game like this. But by reducing that aspect, by nerfing that aspect, they've kind of diminished the longevity of the game, or they've artificially stretched the longevity thinner. They've made it harder to earn legendaries, and in turn they've technically made the end game longer, but in a way that makes the pool shallower and maybe paves the road for players getting bored faster. And beyond that, Tookabee, Splittooth, Sandshifter, and Coleslaw all drop less stuff. And then here's another one that is really baffling people. Expedition times for Campplant and Boomtown have been reduced. So the way expeditions work is that if you beat an expedition by a certain time, then you can unlock the gold achievement, which gives you the most loot. And what the developers are doing is reducing the amount of time that you need to beat the expeditions in if you want to get gold achievements. And you pair that with the nerfs to powers, and you pair that with all the other loot nerfs, and you're looking at a situation where they've just kind of made it that much harder to earn rewarding loot. Again, it's a subtractive change that seems to stem from the developers not being able to keep up with the issues and coming up with these quick fixes that technically solve whatever issue they think needs to be fixed, but it comes at a cost, the cost of the fun of the experience. Games like Anthem did something similar where people were asking that loot be buffed, and one day loot was, through a bug, accidentally buffed, and people expressed to BioWare that, yeah, this is the place where we want to be, and a lot of people requested that the bug be kept. But BioWare, because they didn't want people to run out of content too quickly due to Anthem's lack of content, decided to nerf the loot back down and keep the loot the way it is, even though that was one of the biggest complaints of the game, and it ultimately ended off killing the game. And the same thing could happen to Outriders if the fix for the game's issues is making it less fun, which is how at least a lot of people feel. And looking at forums and social media, plenty of people are complaining about these nerfs. So this is the discussions page for Outriders Steam listing, and you can see plenty of people talking about the nerfs. Thanks for nerfing everything. Holy crap, you guys have to be trolling with the nerfs. Are you really gonna do your player base like this? Etc. Nerfing is not the way to go. Rounds are performing exactly as well as I expected them to. The others fall short for the most part. Buffs, not nerfs. I also missed this one right here that puts it pretty bluntly. Why the F did you lower the timers? Why? Some classes' builds are already struggling as it is. What's the point in gutting them even more? Why didn't you buff other builds to make them viable instead of some lazy nerfs? And keep in mind, this is all on top of the fact that players are struggling to just play the game because of all of the bugs, technical issues, performance issues, crashes, and server issues. Looking at the Reddit post here detailing the upcoming patch, you can see that the upvote ratio isn't in a great place at only 60%. People wondering, just curious, why nerf vulnerability? Doesn't that benefit all builds? Plenty of complaints about expeditions and how they decided to change the expedition times, with people saying don't do it. Time runs already suck ass and make the game a slog. Another Reddit user chimed in with, would just like to point out that on Steam, 8.8% of players have killed 1,000 enemies on expeditions, which should show the majority of players are casual and these timer changes hurt them the most. And then moving past that, there are plenty of individual Reddit threads with titles like time-based endgame content needs to go, expeditions should be objective-based and not time attack-based, I would really enjoy expeditions if they weren't time trials, the patch notes we were hoping for. This post basically compiles the changes that people have been requesting, and a lot of it is either subtle rebalances or buffs that bring everything up to the same level as the stronger stuff, to again not take away from that power fantasy, but rather add to it for everyone else who maybe feel less of it. On Twitter, you'll find plenty of complaints. YouTuber SkillUp tweeted, "Genuinely difficult to describe just how much this first round of loot, timer, and ability nerfs blow. Dev comms to this point have always felt in tune. This feels completely tone deaf. They looked at challenges the game faces and just took the wrong approach for every item." Again, it's similar to how Anthem kept engaging in subtractive updates that would diminish the experience for the sake of artificially extending the game's lifespan, rather than engaging with the proper solution, the additive solution of adding more content, fixing the issue, shipping the game complete so developers don't struggle to keep up, etc. You know, don't nerf the loot, boost the loot and boost the content so that there is more room for that loot to shine, etc. Like, that's the way to do things, but when a game launches so broken and so unfinished and so unpolished, you know, actually adding more, engaging in additive solutions becomes that much of a struggle. And then looking at Outriders' official Twitter page, looking at the responses to the patch notes tweet, you've got people saying stuff like, "Removing the legendary reward for redoing hunts and bounties is a poor choice in my opinion. It's 10 quests, and 1 guaranteed legendary for time investment of an hour. It didn't seem unreasonable. I liked how I can still progress my build without sweating in expeditions." Now, Outriders' response was that there was an exploit whereby users were abusing the system to generate multiple legendaries in a very short amount of time, which I get, but the developer solution was subtractive for everyone. If you find a problem in your house, you look at that specific problem and find solutions to fix it. You don't, you know, demolish the entire house. If there's a legendaries exploit, you don't just nuke the entire loot system, the rate at which you get legendaries. You find ways to make it so that that specific exploit can't be used. Here's somebody else who expressed, "As a single player and someone who hasn't even obtained my first legendary, you guys just made me feel way more unenthusiastic about getting done those beast and bounty quests done, knowing that my chances for getting a nice legendary payoff aren't happening." People enjoy these subsequent playthroughs because they were guaranteed by the end of that struggle that they would be rewarded. But now that guarantee is gone, and so that's just going to motivate people less to engage with these activities subsequently, and it's going to be that much more frustrating when legendaries aren't yielding when they should. People have already gotten a taste of what it's like to have that guaranteed legendary system that Outriders has taken away, and going back is just going to suck because, you know, the way it was done before was just way better and way more fun and way more incentivizing, way more motivating. So yeah, you get the idea. I could go on and on, but generally, while there are people who are defending elements of some of these updates, generally people seem to agree that this is not a great patch. It's very tone deaf and goes counter to what makes this game fun. They're taking the fun elements of this game and nuking those. This wouldn't be the first looter to take this kind of approach, and with other looters, it never really worked out, especially for something like Anthem. I'm not saying that there isn't a place for nerfs here and there, but they have to be considered very carefully. If there is a way to prop everything up instead of bring everything down, that should be the approach that should be taken. And with Outriders, it feels like there are better solutions than what they're offering here. But it feels like, you know, they were so focused on resolving these issues quickly rather than properly that they decided to implement solutions that are detrimental to everyone rather than solutions that actually focus on the specific problems and kind of enhances everything. That's just one man's take on the whole situation. If you're a player of Outriders, let me know in the comments below what you think about the upcoming update and what your overall experience has been like with the game. And to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.